You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima. Good morning, Allison. It's been a while.
Happy New Year, Justin. How are you in this January day in 2025?
2025, yeah. We're doing all right here in Washington. Just kind of been recovering from the holiday season.
Yeah. As one does.
As one does. It's not that we have a lot, but it just, I don't know, every year it seems to just take a lot out of you. And so we've, outside of the Christmas activities, or since then, we're trying to just kind of rest as much as we can and just kind of get back slowly into the swing of normal life. And so that's kind of, we're right at that cusp of, okay, we can't just keep resting and not doing anything forever here. We have to start, like,
really
doing the normal daily stuff. So we're kind of getting back into this, easing ourselves back into normal life after the holidays there. But yeah.
Because were you able to take time off?
Yes. So I took off from Christmas Eve through New Year's Day.
Nice.
Which is, I usually try to take off some time at the end of the year there. And it was good. There was some stuff at work that was going on. I like to take off, obviously, when it feels like there's nothing happening, and the work that I was working on is like handled and dealt with, and there's no stuff that needs to occur while I'm out.
Sure.
That wasn't the case this time, and I feel like I did a really good job of not thinking about it at all.
Hey, nice.
Yeah, things could be going, things could be on fire there, but I'm on break. There's other
people.
Good for you. It's their job to deal with it while I'm out. And so, yeah, I feel like I handled that aspect of it pretty well, which made for a better break.
I'm sure.
So, yeah.
I've noticed that about you, because even when you were here in town visiting that one time, I feel like you have really good work boundaries. Like most people, myself included, have like, my work email goes to my phone.
Right. Yeah.
And you're like, absolutely not for you. Yeah. So that's your good model for that. Yeah. That's my favorite week of the year is in between Christmas and New Year's, because usually it's like everybody shut down. Yeah. It's like everybody, it's not like if you take a vacation in March, but like everybody else is still bustling around.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, no. Like we have all agreed, right? That this is the week that everyone stays in their pajamas. And so I'm glad that you had that week too. And that you put those boundaries up and allowed yourself to like, I'm not going to think about that.
Yeah.
And it was all fine because you've gone back since then, right?
I've had 2 days back at work, and some stuff came up, but it's fine.
Look at you.
It worked out. Yeah. So
nice.
Yeah.
10 million points to you for that. Like, you're just like, it's fine. Yeah. Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. How about you? How has your time been since we last spoke in November?
Right. Yeah. So I took the month of December off, which the brilliant thing about that was that basically started at like Thanksgiving.
Okay. Yeah,
and then went through now, right? Because of the holidays on either end. And so I had in October was feeling pretty frazzled. We had the big conference coming up and all these things. And I just said to Sean, like, I just need a vacation. And Sean's the best. So he was like, okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, what if I didn't work in December? And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? And he's like, I mean, you're the boss. Like it's your company. Like it's your nonprofit. Like you can decide that. I was like, okay. And so just made that decision to not, you and I didn't record. We didn't do support groups and coaching, no meetings on the books. And it was also, I realized that the last time I took a month off, remember, was because I was basically having a breakdown.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Last time it was not really an option.
Right.
Like you were forced essentially by how you were doing to take that month off. And I thought about how much, I don't know, it's lovely that this time around you're doing it proactively.
Yes. And then that I got to choose it, right? Whereas before, I mean, I chose it, but I kind of had to, right? Yeah. Or there have been times in the past when I wasn't my own boss, where I took time off when Sean had like half of his tongue removed.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm going to need a couple months off for this,
Yeah.
So I've never had time off just for the sake of time off without like disaster medical stuff, or even traveling, right? Which we know is not relaxing. And so it was just more like, and I'm telling you, and we're going to talk today about kind of like, what did I learn from that? But it was amazing. So, and these sort of 3 magical things coincided that made it such a great month.
Okay.
One is that I decided no meetings.
Right.
Side note, I love what I do, right? I love this podcast. I love support groups. I love coach. I love it. Love it. And there's something for me, I'm too calendar driven. So if there's something on the calendar, even if it's something that I love, it feels like, I have to, gotta get ready, you know? Yeah. And so it was just, it's not like, I have this terrible, stressful job. I love it. And it was just like the absence of doing, you know, that was so lovely. So that's one magical thing that happened. Another is that Sean was inspired by me and decided he didn't want to have any medical appointments this month.
Okay.
So he had actually just in November had like all the follow-ups for all the people. So mostly there weren't things on the books anyway, but he does need to go have another Mose. And he just made the decision. He's like, I don't want to do that in December. And, you know, I mean, what might be the repercussions of that? It might mean that the next Mose is worse, right? Because some of those spots might be further along. But he was like, I need a break too.
Yeah.
And we realized that probably in the 14 years since his diagnosis, there's probably never been one whole month without doctor's appointments.
Wow.
And so for me, even if I had not been working, but if I had been like going to doctor's appointments, it would not have felt restful, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's number 2. And then number 3 is that I found a migraine medicine that is working for me.
Oh, that is so great.
I had been having migraines probably every like 7 to 10 days, and it was knocking me out for like 2 to 3 days at a time. It just felt like how I can't even function.
Right.
And I was trying all the things and finally got on something that's preventative that I get to take every other day, and it's absolutely working.
Oh, I'm so happy.
So those 3 things coincided to make December like magical. And so today, you know, with this podcast, and then tomorrow, like I'm starting back up. And so I'm doing a lot of thinking around like, how can it not just be like, I'm either on or off, right? How can I integrate the rest and the things that I did and learned in December as I go back? So it's not just like, well, that was nice, but now I go back to real life, you know? So in that, with this month, I really thought about what are the things that I had autonomy over and do have autonomy over moving forward.
Right.
Because I don't know about you, but I feel like this caregiving life often just feels like it's happening at me. It's happening to me.
Right.
The disasters are just like coming to like, it's like, I'm like, you know, like I'm trying to like walk in the ocean and the waves just keep knocking me down. Right. And I have no control over it. And it's just waiting for the next wave to hit.
Right.
And that is true in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think what I realized is there are some things that I do have autonomy over, and there's some things that Sean has autonomy over. And they might be small, but they might be significant. And so how can we hold on to those? Okay. So that's what I would love to talk about today. I do want to make a huge point that I realize that I am like in this totally privileged moment in my life where I am my own boss.
Yeah.
Right. Where I got to say like, okay, Allison, like you don't have to work this month. Oh, great. Thanks, Allison. Right. And that is not the case. That is not the case the rest of my life. That was not the case for most people. And so I realized that like, that's not a thing that most people can do.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that I realize that I have all kinds of privilege that I do get to do that. And that Sean is even in a place where he can say,
right,
I'm going to take a month off. Right. And that some people, that is not an option for them either. So I just wanted to put that out there. But
no, that's good.
So as I talk about all this and autonomy and all that, how does that strike you?
Yeah, I certainly, I think it's something important to talk about because I can so resonate with like you mentioning that the caregiving stuff, like when that was our life, it does feel like that's just, it's happening to you or at you. And it's just, you're along for the ride.
Yeah.
Kind of the disease is kind of running the show.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to focus on that aspect of it.
Yeah.
It's easy to focus on where you feel like you don't have control. and where you've lost control, where you once feel like you had some control over things and you don't anymore.
Yeah.
So finding areas where it feels like you can have some control can be really empowering.
Yeah.
Because it feels like you have some agency over your life, over your situation.
I love that word. Yeah. That the agency. And I keep thinking about when you said the disease is running the show.
Yeah.
Like that's powerful. Like that, that feels so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's fine. So, to find places where you can say, I'm making this choice for this reason for myself, whatever it is. I mean, obviously your example is a big example. Like, hey, I need this rest. I'm going to take this rest. I'm going to prioritize rest. And that's not, as you said, that's not accessible to everyone. And so, surely there are small things, small areas of life where you can exert some control. Not being in the caregiving day to day, I don't have a recent example of that, but I do. A recent thing that I did to kind of, I guess, take some control of things is like I recently, this past year, 20 years at my job. I've been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
I had my 20-year work anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Because you got that. That was your first job out of college.
Yeah.
First and only.
Yeah. So I've been there a long time.
Yep.
And I kind of am having this moment of like, okay, the plan is to work there until I retire. Right.
Right.
Retirement's still a long ways off. I have more years of work ahead of me than I have behind me still.
You are a young man. Yes.
And that feels like daunting.
Yeah.
Because I don't like, my job is not my favorite thing in the world.
Right. Right.
But it's not terrible.
Right.
But also I've felt like over the years, I've very much put my head down, done the work and kind of focused on that and not like the social aspect of the office that I know for some people is a big deal.
Right.
And so one thing is I hadn't been to our company Christmas party in years. I think I've been to maybe less than 5 over this time. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go because I have 20 years plus left of work.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a more enjoyable experience if I have a little bit more human connection with the people I work with. And so I went and it was good. It was a positive thing. I ended up talking to one of the first people who mentored me, who was retiring. And I didn't realize, that. So it was good to be able to connect one last time before that. And it's something I'm trying to just be a little more conscious about is this is an area where what can I control within work to make the experience of the next, several decades, feel like less of a slog and more like, I don't know, something more enjoyable. So that's kind of a non-caregiving example.
Yeah, but I think it's a great one because it's the same. It's like you don't really have like the work thing is just happening, right? It's it's a part of your life. It's gonna. I remember really clearly when you talked about that on the episode where we had the different people of different ages, and you were just sort of like, I'm staring down 20 years.
Oh yeah, right. Remember that.
And so same, right? Whether it's caregiving or it's life stuff like job, like that's thing feels like it can run the show and that we are just along for the ride.
Right.
And so I love that example of like, this was a place where you were like, okay, if I need to be along for the ride, how can I make this ride a little better?
Yeah.
And you took that step to say like, I do have some agency in this. Like, I don't have agency to be like, I'm quitting next week, but I do have agency to say like, how can I make this a little more enjoyable?
Yeah.
And you took that step. And I think that's a great example. And also I want to say that I'm happy for you that you don't have a recent caregiving exsample because that's pretty great.
Yeah.
That you're not chock full of hard caregiving things at this moment. So, I just think just this piece about the disease is in control, is running the show is really striking me this morning because it can feel like that.
Yeah.
I feel like I always have kind of a running tally in my brain, a little T-chart of like the times that things have gone poorly and the times that things have gone right. And so even like this year I got through Thanksgiving and everything was fine.
Right.
And I got through my birthday and everything was fine. And Sean and I went on a little trip during December and everything was fine. We got through Christmas, everything was fine. And I was like, what is happening? And it was almost like, look at all these check marks in the good column that I want to pay attention to, because it just feels like the check marks in the hard column are often winning.
Right.
Right. And so because of that, there was a moment I have to share that we were like, I don't know, 2 hours into Sean and I went away to a cabin for 5 days. We were like 2 hours into it. And Sean was like, I think I have shingles.
Oh, gosh.
I was like, of course you do. I didn't say that, but you know what I mean? That's what my brain said. It's like, of course you do. Because if we look at the data, this is what happens, right? It ended up not being shingles. So it was okay. And we got to stay. But my brain was just like, yep, here we go. That was cool. We got 2 hours, you know? And so I think that there are so many of these pieces. Like, we could be at the ER this afternoon. I don't know, right? There are so many of these pieces around disease and life that we don't have control over. And so what are these little pieces where we can have some agency? And so I'll speak for Sean that it was a game changer for him that he decided to like not have any appointments, because this month, and I could almost see him sort of like puffing up in a good, in a way of like, like I have a say here.
Right.
And it feels like this example of almost like we have just been on this hamster wheel. We have just been spinning and spinning and spinning. And just like the person says, go to the next appointment. We say, okay. And we put it on the calendar. We just go and we go and we go.
Yep.
And that he took this moment, because he encouraged me to do it with work. That he took the moment to jump off the hamster wheel and be like, wait a minute, I'm going to not do this for a month. Right. And I tell you, he is a different person than he was 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I will also say that I feel like our relationship is different, because I was able to for these 4 or 5 weeks, almost entirely see him as like Sean instead of the patient.
Yeah.
Because when you're seeing your person in these like medical situations over and over and over and over again, and if he had that Mose, even if that would have been one big, terrible day, he would have spent the whole rest of the month bandaged.
Yep.
And I would have spent the rest of the month doing wound care.
Yeah.
And that's different. And so it just felt like we could be a couple.
Oh, I'd love that.
Instead of, except for those little moments of me being like, oh, for goodness sake, do you have shingles? There were a couple little moments like that. But for the most part, it was like, no, this is Sean, my husband, and not Sean that I'm like, are you, what's your, are you okay? And so I just feel like it was a game changer for both of us to have that space. And I think for him to be like, hey, I have a say in this as well. And especially for him as an Enneagram 9 peacemaker, he doesn't often stand up and say what he wants or needs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
He just kind of lets it happen to him. So I think this was really different for him to be able to stop and say that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now, you have this kind of big example of this, both you and Sean, each individually taking some control and getting off the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
That's not something that we as caregivers can do on a regular basis or for an extended period of time, right?
Yep.
So I'm curious what you have learned from this break and what areas, what things you're going to do differently, or recognizing where, okay, I do have a little bit of control here. I'm going to focus on it, but I'm going to acknowledge that. And I'm going to be conscious about having control here versus being along for the ride. So is there anything that jumps out there? Yeah.
I mean, I think for life in general, right? I feel like this was just an opportunity for me to jump off the hamster wheel and to look at everything.
Right.
Right. And so I think any of us can stop for a second and say, what are we just saying yes to, going along with, just because it's the next thing?
Right.
Just because it's the thing we've always done.
Yeah.
So we did a support group, right? It was right after Thanksgiving. And I don't know, we had like 20, 30 people there. It was, people really needed some support around the holidays.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot that night about, there's all this whole, like, the way it's always been done. And one person shared, and I know I have her permission to share this, that she spent all this time making this big Thanksgiving dinner and she was so tired, and her husband is in a place where he could only eat like 2 bites. And it was just the two of them. And then she was so tired from cooking, she didn't want to eat. But she's like, I felt like it was what I had to do because it's what I've always done. Right. And so I think it's a piece of this is like, we can get so wrapped up in the stuff and in the day to day and the like, and especially, you know, like a long-term illness like us, right? This is just what we do. How can we step back and say like, okay, what are we doing? Because it's what we've always done, because it's what people expect of us. It's because it's what the doctors are saying. Because I think when you think about the doctors see like one body part.
Right. Yeah.
Right. They only focus on one body part, unfortunately. And so when they say, okay, come back in 2 weeks, they don't realize all the other things you have between now and those 2 weeks. And they don't realize all the other, you know, they should if they're a good doctor, but they often don't.
Yeah.
And so I think big picture, the answer to your question is like evaluating everything.
Right.
All the parts of your life to say like, okay, what am I just saying yes to when I don't really need to? Or what am I saying no to that I could be saying? You know, like what are the things? What are all the things that I'm just doing in my day to day that I could maybe take some more autonomy over? And so when I was thinking about this in relationship to, you know, caregiving, I think about things like people, you can decide with folks like, how much do you want to share and with whom? Right. Maybe you've been sharing a lot and people are like being judgy because people can be. And then you decide, you know what? This is my story. Yeah. And I've decided that I'm not going to share that much anymore. Or maybe it's the opposite. You haven't been sharing and because you feel like it's making people uncomfortable and you say, you know what? It would actually be really helpful to me if I could share some of this.
Right.
Like that's one space, but it's an important space to decide.
Yeah.
I have the autonomy. This is my story and my person's story. And together we get to decide how much of this we're going to share and with whom.
Yeah.
Right. Even, or things like delegating, right? You can decide like, how much of this am I going to keep doing? How much of this can I delegate? How much of this can I say, you know what, not in this season. I'm not going to be the PTO president this month or this year because I got other stuff, you know, like what are some of those things? And I think just a bigger picture is like how and with whom to spend your energy.
Right. Yeah.
And if it's somebody that is not like we caregivers and humans need like all the bucket filling possible.
Yeah.
And if it's a person that is not doing that for you right now, like, is that an opportunity that you can, you know, take to say like, that's not what I need right now.
Right.
And I'm going to make that decision. I'm not going to just keep doing this and being around this person just because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. What really kind of stands out to me is just the piece of like, so yeah, we feel like we're along the ride with caregiving and that we don't have as much within that where it feels like we have control, but that is not our entire life.
Yeah.
It often can feel like that is our entire life, but there are other spheres. They may be diminished from what they once were, but like you were saying, like from a social aspect, like who am I spending my time with? Where am I putting my energy? Yep. That's something you can have control over. For me, work was a thing that was a sphere where I felt like I had control when we were in the thick of it. And so like I could go to work. I could focus on that. I could have agency in that realm. And just having that space where I could do that was huge. And feeling like life was not just happening to me, but I could do, I don't know, agency. I had agency in areas, and that just makes such a huge difference in how you're feeling overall. So yeah, that, just examining the non-caregiving.
Yes, exactly.
Corners of your life. And seeing what's there. Yeah.
Yeah. And what needs to stay or what can change or what you can do more of or whatever that is. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we did an episode a while back, but about like how sometimes it can feel like because we have so little control in this caregiving life that there are other things that we cling to.
Right.
Right. So I think probably that day I would guess I talked about like things like organizing my closets. Right. Yeah. So there are times that I do that and that was actually something I did on the break is I organized like our whole like medicine closet, because what happens is like, I know there's going to be another day where we're going to need that thermometer and we're going to need that bandage or we're going to need that medicine. And if I can do something today on this quiet day that will help pave that path a little better. Yeah. So that it's not that day and I'm like, do we have any COVID tests? I don't know. And I'm like throwing stuff, Yeah. Like, it's like, what are the things that we can do so that the pieces that are inevitably still going to happen, right, can at least be a little more pleasant, right? So sort of like you and your social thing, right?
Yeah, right.
you are going to keep working there for 20 years. So now you're going to make it a little more pleasant. Like, I know that medical disasters are still going to happen in my life moving forward. And now I know that because that closet is organized. I mean, that may sound really silly, probably not to the people listening, to non-caregivers, it probably does, but that's going to be a more managed, a more pleasant situation. Like, I even set up a little emergency basket so that has like the thermometer and the blood pressure cuff and the pulse oximeter, you know what I mean? Because in those moments that I know are going to happen, at least then I feel like, okay, I am ready for it.
Yeah.
If that wave's going to come knock me down, at least there's something I can do to make it like a little more manageable. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm even thinking back to like before we had a diagnosis for Sarah, one thing that we did, and this was before she was like fully in bed, like she had a little more capacity, and I think I've talked about it, we put together a binder. And in it we list, we had, these are all the doctors we've seen.
Yeah.
These are all the medications that we've tried, because she was also trying to sort out some headache stuff and some back pain stuff. And like, these are all the medications we've taken. This is what the result was. Why she stopped taking it, it didn't work, or like there was a side effect or something. So just this big information gathering.
Yeah.
Of like, and these are all the tests that she's had done. And so like, as things got more intense, like we had that to go to like, her medical history from our perspective was organized, and we could pull that information.
Yeah.
And I think that pulling all that information together helped us get a picture of, okay, this might be what's going on, and kind of tailoring what doctors we're seeing or how the questions we're asking in those appointments to kind of hone in on, okay, what exactly is going on.
Yeah.
And a specific example from that, like in that direction, is as we were going through this, there was this thing called POTS that I came across as like a comorbidity. Is that the right word? That's like, it's something that happens alongside another disease a lot.
Right.
It always feels like that's the wrong word.
It feels like that's the wrong word, but I know what you're saying. Yeah. Yes. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I came across this thing called POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And it's something that people at the time, we were like, her fibromyalgia was kind of what was the focus. And that's something that can often exist alongside that. And the symptoms were like, oh, wow, like that all lines up.
Yeah.
So that's where I was like, okay, let's take some data. Let's gather our own data.
Yeah.
I made my graphs.
Right. Yes. Love it. Love it.
And then had information to present to the doctor and be like, okay, this, we think this might be happening.
Sure.
Here's what the data we've recorded.
Yeah.
And so, what can we do from there? And we got some medications for that we tried, and kind of got a little bit of better handle on that piece, or better understanding of another aspect that was going on.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something where we had to wait for a doctor to think, oh, maybe we should look at this. And then
exactly.
Maybe it's this. So can you do this? Take this information down. It was like, okay, we can proactively gather more information.
Yes.
And so I think that comes, part of that was the research piece too. And, we don't always have the energy to be doing in that research mode.
Right.
But gaining more knowledge about the situation, about the illness, like that's is an area that we can have, I don't know if control there is the right word, but we can kind of set ourselves up to feel like we're less in the passenger seat.
Yes. Right.
In this journey.
Yes.
Right.
And it's not even the passenger seat. Sometimes it feels like the back seat.
Yeah.
The back seat.
The trunk.
You know what I mean? The trunk. Yes. Like we're in the trunk of the car. That's good. Because that's what it can feel like, right? Like there's a person up there driving and we're in the back, in the trunk. So we can't even see where we're going.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Ooh, love that. Such a good example. And it reminds me of all the conversations we've had around advocacy. And I think it's true that we can think like neither you or I have official medical training.
Right.
Honorary doctorates. Yes. But we don't have official. And so we can, there can be moments of like, well, I mean, the doctor, the person with the letters behind their name hasn't said that. or they haven't done this, or they're suggesting this. And I think that we can just feel like, okay, well, sure. Okay. I'm in the trunk. Just you drive, I'll just let me know when to get out,
Yeah.
And first of all, we know the doctors are like overworked.
Yeah.
And so they're not always as clear minded and prepared as they should be.
Yeah.
But also we know our person best.
Exactly.
And so I think that there's these moments, and like you said, that can sound exhausting. Like somebody might be listening and be like, I got to make a chart and a graph, right?
Right.
And that was actually probably very bucket filling for you, I would guess. I bet you love making charts and graphs. But, so I think that there's pieces like that people might be like, oh, I'm too tired. But I think part of it is to say like, okay, you can be along for the ride and just say, okay, the doctors have this. I'm just going to trust them. And you can also stop and say, hey, actually, have you thought about this? Or what about this? I'm also thinking about things like treatments and when to keep doing treatments and when not to keep doing treatments. There's somebody that I hope we can have on as a guest who I love. He's a oncologist at the University of Minnesota. And he does a lot of work around, I think I've talked about this here, the phrase time toxicity, and just about the time that patients and caregivers spend getting their medical treatment and how we don't give that enough clout. So his research has shown that like when a doctor assigns someone to get a good blood draw, that it can end up taking up to 3 hours.
Okay. Yeah.
When you calculate all that stuff. But a big thing that he also does is to talk about, if I said to you like, okay, you can have 8 months to live if you do this treatment or 6 months without the treatment. Like most people are going to be like, well, of course I want 8 months.
Right.
But what he wants to do is make sure that doctors and systems are being clear with the people around like, here's what that 8 months would look like.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to look really different if you're spending most of that 8 months in a hospital or a clinic. Right. So I think, again, that's a place where we have agency to not just say, this is the thing you're recommending. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
But just to say like, actually, this is our life, this is our time, this is our whatever. And we would like to make some decisions around what that's like. And that can feel scary because we don't have the letters behind our name.
Right.
But I think that I'll speak for myself. I can sometimes forget that we have that agency and that power to say, I hear you recommending that, or I see you saying this and no, thank you.
Yeah.
Or let's do it a different way or something like that. And that we do get to drive the car a little.
Yeah. Right. I think that piece around us knowing our person the best is a huge thing to remember. And I think that in medical contexts, we can forget that or feel like that's, I don't know. So like somehow it's the power dynamic there or it just feels intimidating to be like, well, actually, I don't think that's a good idea because because of this, and this.
Yeah.
But to recognize we hold a lot of critical information about the day-to-day life. And sometimes that's stuff that you can't really do a test for or, pin down a specific thing. It's a little more abstract. It's a little more, how their energy ebbs and flows throughout the day or all of that kind of stuff. And so being able to, in those appointments, one, relay that information on how they're doing and how they're responding to different things, but also if it feels like necessary to question what they're recommending based on what you know about how they've responded to similar things or how that's going to impact their life. And to recognize that is because that can feel, the whole interacting with the medical community can feel like you're along for the ride as well. Like you show up, they tell you what's going on. They say, do this, and you go home. Yeah. And sometimes that's what you have you need that maybe. Right. You feel like this is all overwhelming too much. You need somebody to kind of be direct.
Tell me what to do. Yeah.
Tell me what to do. But I think that if we can advocate and have some agency there in those settings, I think we can have just feel less like we're on the hamster wheel or less like life is happening to us, but more that we are a team member in the process, to remember that, our input and the input of our person is super important in that, in those interactions. Yeah.
Yeah. I just keep thinking about like, we have hard lives, right? And, everybody's got their own hard stuff. But I think that especially when you've got this, people who are caregivers, there is this thing that's happening to us and that we can't control. And so how can, like, sometimes I feel guilty, like me saying, Sean and I got to go to a cabin for 5 days. I'm like, oh, I feel guilty about that. Why? Right?
Yeah.
Like instead it should be like, we have this really hard thing that we can't make go away.
Yeah.
What I can try to do is make everything else as lovely as possible. And now everybody should try to do that, right?
Yeah, right.
But for some reason, my brain is like, you get to deserve the really lovely things because you also have these really hard things or something. I don't know. My brain doesn't always, whatever. It's not always the wisest. So the point is that I think, how can we think about just the agency we have on all the other things, all the other pieces, and filling up the gaps and the cracks of the rest of our lives with just loveliness as much as we can, knowing that this is this one thing we can't make go away. But what we can do is all the cricks and cracks around it, that we can fill that with loveliness, or whatever the word is that you want. Like, that's the word I want. And so I even think about our daughter, right? Our daughter chose to go to college 20 minutes from home.
Right.
And there at the school, they said, okay, don't let your kids come home for the first 6 weeks. They got to really get established. And we were like, okay. And then after like a week or two, she's like, can I come home? We're like, yes, you can. Right. And I think that, and my mom said at one point something like, your family's a little bit different and your family might need different things.
Right.
And so it's sort of like, we're going to break that rule. We're going to say like, girl, you come home whenever you want to come home. And we're here. And if you need to put your eyeballs on your dad, and if you need to like be here in this cozy place, like, yes. And so it's thinking about like, that's a moment where we had the agency to be able to say like, we're going to break that rule because our family needs this extra loveliness and not feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And I think even, a couple episodes ago, we talked about the whole thing I went through about, I made the decision to not be present for those Moe's appointments anymore. Right. That's another place that I have agency.
Yeah.
The Moe's is going to need to continue to happen. A decision I can make is that I'm not going to witness it.
Right.
Right. And that, and so like all these little places where we can just stop, pause, look at what we have been doing or what we're about to do and say like, where do I have agency here? Am I doing this because I need to? Am I doing it because I think I'm supposed to? Am I doing it because it's what I've always done? Am I doing it because somebody else is saying I should do it? Is this decision going to help me fill the cracks and spaces of my life with the loveliness that I need and deserve?
Yeah. Yeah. I even think like on a small level, like, okay, your person is taking a nap.
Yeah.
So there's nothing for you to do to attend to them. And you've got a pile of laundry.
Yep.
And you're exhausted.
Yep.
Maybe it's always felt like, okay, when they're sleeping, I have to catch up on the stuff around the house. I have to keep working. I have to use that time to, do all of this other thing. You can take a nap too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can sit in your chair and read a book.
Yeah.
You can have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, like your well-being is important because you're a human.
Yep.
And so to be able to prioritize that and find those gaps where you can say, okay, I can choose what I do right now. And maybe you're going to start real small because this feels like a big thing, a big step to be taking. It feels, maybe you feel guilty because you should be somehow spending all of your energy every moment of every day trying to improve the quality of life of your person. And that's going to run you down. That's going to, like, you can't maintain that.
Right.
Year in and year out. So start small, find those small moments where you can say, this is what I need for 5 minutes. I can sit in a chair, close my eyes for 5 minutes and just rest. The laundry's still going to be there.
Yep.
It's not going anywhere.
Right.
So I think just, you can start really small.
And I think, yes, absolutely. And I think that I've heard caregivers talk about their person saying, I don't want you running around. Like, come sit with me.
Yeah.
Come be with me. And I think that I know that Sean has said that it brought him a lot of joy to see me relaxed this month. You know, and that I got to spend time with him.
Right.
And that I was being fulfilled much more so than him being like he would never be like, oh, why aren't you doing the laundry? Right. And so I think that, again, you said the word should at one point, like that we feel like, oh, we should be.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that it, like, who says that?
Right.
Who is telling us that we should? And how can we step back and say, okay, what is the thing? What does my day ahead look like? My week ahead, like whatever. And is there something, and what are all the things I'm about to do and why? Yeah. I mean, I don't want to turn this into a New Year's resolution kind of thing, but I mean, that's kind of this moment. A lot of people are thinking about like New Year, right? So it's not that, but I think it's a moment of reflection. Yeah. Right. And I also I'm all into like the let's listen to nature, and like nature is telling us right now to go to bed. Right. Right. It is January. It's light out for like 15 minutes. This morning at my house, it was 1 degree below zero. It was the actual temperature. Right. Like, so like nature is telling us right now, go inside, be cozy, take a nap, go to bed early, turn off the lights. Now, some of you are like, I can't because and there are absolutely moments and stages where it's like, yeah, we can't just ignore all the things. Yeah. But what can we change or do or have agency over? So yeah. This was really a perfect timing for me because I'm like I said, on the precipice of going back tomorrow. Right. Like tomorrow is my first official day back at it. And so I feel like I just gave myself a pep talk. Good. Good. I'm glad. We should talk about supporters though. Yeah. What role could supporters play in this topic?
The one area, and it's a thing we've talked about a lot, is, okay, what can you take off a caregiver's plate? Yep. Because if they feel like they have less stuff to get done in the day, there is physically more time for them to have space to choose to do something for themselves, or to be able to spend time and just be with their person. Yep. Whatever it is, it's easier for them to do that if they feel like they have less on their plate. Yep. I think that's on a very practical level. Yeah. That's one right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I had someone the other day send me a message. She said, I'm home for the rest of break. Can I do your laundry? And I said, actually, I just did all my laundry, unfortunately. I said, but I did just like clean out the closets. Would you be willing to like take some stuff to the Goodwill and the here and there, the whatever? And she was like, sure. Right. But she proactively reached out and said that, which was beautiful. Right. So beautiful. I think another one is supporting, like, because I think with that word should, like, make sure supporters that you're not shoulding on people is what like people like to say. So that you're not saying, oh, well, you should, or are you coming to this thing, or are you that, or oh, but the doctors have said, and like, no, let them make their decisions and let them have, like, don't add any extra voices to their decision making process that aren't helpful.
Exactly. Yeah.
And just, if you hear them say something like, oh, well, my person has decided to not do any procedures this month, like, okay, great. Yeah. We support you in that. I've decided not to go into that room anymore. Great. I would support you in that. You know what I mean? Like, just know that like caregivers don't make decisions lightly. And so if they did make a decision, how can you support them in that wholeheartedly? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good to be back here with you.
It's been lovely.
It has been. And now we're 101.
101.
So, yeah. I think one last thing I'll just say real quick that I just remembered is that something I noticed in this month is that because I had said no to working and appointments and all of that, that there were other things I was able to say yes to. So a friend reached out one day and said, I'm going to go see a movie in your neighborhood in a half hour. I know it's last minute. You interested? And I was like, yes, I am. And then my brother-in-law and sister-in-law had a big flood in their house. She was like, do you have capacity to come help? And I was like, yes, I do. Right. Yeah. And so it just felt like, as opposed to like squishing the calendar full of things, when it was all the way open, I had both time and energy and capacity to do both like spontaneous, lovely things, but also spontaneous, helpful things.
Right.
That before I would have been like, "Ooh, I think I can't go to that movie, or I can't help because everything's packed."
Yep.
So that was a really helpful reminder for me.
Good.
Is to, when you give yourself that space, then other lovely things might happen, or it doesn't, and then you take a nap, and that's great too. You know. So yeah. All right. Well, Happy New Year to you, my friend. I'm glad to be back here with you.
Yeah, for sure. It's been great talking.
All right. See you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.